To QI, the low-budget quiz show, otherwise known as Who Wants to Be a Commissionaire? Let me introduce our contestants, one of whom tonight has the chance to win absolutely all. Will it be A, Mark Steele, B, Vic Reeves, C, Roger McGowan, or D, actually, let's ask the audience. Welcome to you all. Now, tonight's programme is all about denial and deprivation. So to that end, we've done away with dreary old desks, we've fired the lighting director, and the audience is actually out in the street tonight. And, of course, the buzzers tonight will be operated by hand. They'll be hand-cranked. And Roger will go... Mark goes... Vic goes... And Alan goes... We are the Tonight, denial and deprivation. Each of you has some pieces of jailbreaking equipment, all of which have been successfully used. At the end of the show, I'm going to ask you to use your skill and judgment to work out how it might have been done. But first, why do children play with their food? The sixth child of Sigmund Freud was called Anna Freud, and she took up her father's beacon of battiness. She was the first person to write about denial. That's Sigmund on the right.
For me, playing with food came out of being deprived in Liverpool when there were no toys.
So did you make sort of things out of meatballs instead of Lego?
Mum used to put out a plate of turnip tops and cockles.
So, as a youth, your toys were cockles?
My first toy was toy cheese. for Christmas. Honestly, it was a metal-like cheese portion, which you used to wind up, I remember this, on the lino, and put it down. I used to make, like, cheesy movements.
Cheesy movements. That is a very good reason to play with food, and it makes me all the sicker at the weirdness of Anna Freud. Anna Freud believed by playing with their food they were really playing with their excrement.
The thing is, a child could play with its excrement
if it wanted to.
If it wanted to.
Of all human phases that you're in, lower infancy is the one where you can most get away with playing with your excrement.
Oh, he's got his hand in his nappy again. But that's the one thing that we don't touch.
The Freud family is a good example. Anna Freud suffered from depression all her life and never had children.
Sigmund Freud was terrified of the number 62, and so he refused to ever stay in a hotel that had more than 61 rooms in case he got number 62. And the first time after he'd made this rule, the first room that he was booked into was number 31. And he went, oh, see? Half of 62.
Yeah, but 62 rhymes with poo. 6 looks like a poo, pursued by a swan.
You know, one of the things that people say is sort of a test of whether you're anal is whether you keep your records in alphabetical order.
Yeah.
All that, but I think, well, surely it depends on how many records you've got. I mean, if you've just got 2 and you keep going back and checking and going, oh, ABBA, ZZ Top, they're still there, that's all right. I've got a room full of bloody records. I keep them in alphabetical order so I can find the one I want. Apparently it means I've got a problem with my arse. How is that?
I shouldn't think, in her time, they had alphabeti spaghetti.
That's true.
Which was the main reason I play with my food every breakfast.
I just insert my meatballs up my arsehole whenever they turn up on the plate.
And if they want to call you anal, it's up to them.
It's in their court. The ball is in their court.
The ball is up your arse. Ineffably, imponderably stupid and wonderful. Now, Vic, does your wife like banting? Does she like a good bant? Has she
Oh,
ever banted?
regularly.
Does she?
On a Sunday afternoon after the war film.
She bants, does she?
My wife adores bunting.
Yes.
Does she? Oh. This is banting. It's what we call a back formation. Do you know the verb to maffick, which means to celebrate, which comes from Mafficking Night, when the relief of Mafficking in the Boer War. And so people said, we're Mafficking. Rather like the old joke about Kipling. I don't know, I've never kippled. Because it's obviously Kipling's not a verb, nor is Mafficking. But banting is the same thing. It was actually a man called William Banting who started a fad that is still with us today. He wrote a book called A Letter on Corpulence in 1864. And he was the first man systematically to come up with diets. To bant is to diet. I'm banting. I'm on a diet.
Biltong is a dried meat, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And building is a sort of large edifice.
Air-dried meat is a mystery to me.
Is it?
Because I tried to do it... I was in a restaurant, had a bit of steak and tried to dry it out in the toilets on the hand dryer.
Life with Vic. No, but anyway, William Banting, as I say, started this trend, which before, really, in our civilization at least, fatness had been a sign of prosperity and no one had ever worried about it. But they think that the person who really started the trend in America was William Howard Taft, the American president, who got stuck in a bath once. He was so fat. And he decided to do something about it and went on a diet, and this became well known. And at the same time, Hollywood was beginning, of course. And suddenly this idea of trying to be thin caught on and has been plaguing us ever since, of course. As late as the 50s, the big fad was the tapeworm pill. You swallowed a pill that had a tapeworm egg in it. Because people observed that poor people were very thin often. And perhaps it was because they often had parasites and worms inside, not because they weren't eating enough. No, no.
A friend of mine had a tapeworm.
Really?
3 feet long.
When did he discover that he had
And he
it?
went to the doctor.
Fair enough.
I don't know how they got it out.
There's that rumour about the Mars bar, isn't there?
Oh, go on, what?
You've got a tapeworm, you starve yourself, then you put out a Mars bar near you.
Yes.
And the tapeworm is so hungry, it comes out and goes for the Mars bar. And you grab it and pull it out.
But there we are. More on disturbing physical practices now. What is meant by the expression Hoover the talking seal? What would I mean if I said that?
It's either one of those wonderful Oz expressions for throwing up.
Yeah.
Just going out to Hoover the talking seal.
Or my wife came in just as I was hoovering the talking seal.
Or Edgar Hoover. None of the presidents liked him at all. They all tried to get rid of him, particularly Nixon. And I imagine him flopping round the Oval Room, balancing a ball on his head. Or it could be a talking seal called Hoover. Which
Really? Yes.
It's a talking seal called Hoover.
It's a talking seal called Hoover. The only mammal ever known to have produced human speech. He was found as a seal pup in 1971 in Maine by a family called the Swallows. And they found that he started talking, and he even had a Bostonian accent. I don't know if you'll agree. I think he's saying here something like, hello there and get out of here, in a more or less New England accent. Get out of here. I think it's get out of here, come on, get down. Let's hear that again. We've got to hear one more time. I have to say, I've heard Americans a lot less eloquent than that. He died at a very ripe old age in 1985.
What were his final words?
Well, yes.
Get out of here! But he appeared on ABC's breakfast show, Good Morning America. He received his own obituary in the Boston Globe. Now, from the blah blah seal to La Bastille. Do you see what I've done there?
It's in Paris.
Paris is good.
Yes.
Very good. Can you tell me anything else interesting about La Bastille, either of you,
It
Mark?
was a prison,
It was a prison.
and it was stormed on July the 12th.
14th, but close, 2 days out.
You say 2 days out, but I'd have stormed it 2 days early. I'd have been on my own.
There were only 7 prisoners, weren't there?
Is exactly the right number. There were only
2 lunatics, 2
Yes!
kids.
Oh.
2 lunatics, 2 forgers, 2 thieves, and a very bad mime artist.
Wasn't he convinced he was Julius Caesar, one of them?
Oh, this is good. You're getting points too. I'll come to this. This is impressive. And listen to this. We have 4 forgers. We have the Comte de Solange, who was inside for sexual misdemeanours of an unspecified kind. 2 lunatics, one of whom was an Englishman or an Irishman, they're not quite sure, called Major White, with a waist-length beard, who thought he was Julius Caesar.
You know, the Marquis de Sade would have been in the prison at the time of the storming of the Bastille. It's a very tragic story, this, because he was in there for a long time, but a week before the storming of the Bastille, he was transferred to another prison because he'd been upsetting passers-by by shouting obscenities at them through a tube out the window.
It's as if you've been reading my card, Mark.
And so all this stuff, it was tragic, because he spoke to his wife and he said, look, can you make sure you go round there and pick all this right? I've spent years writing in there. But she thought, well, you know, no rush, is there? It's the Bastille.
Safest place in Paris.
To that? And then I think she went down there on the day of the storming of the Bastille and thought, oh, shit.
Absolutely right. 10 days before the storming was when he was moved to Vincennes, and the authorities were upset because he was shouting not just obscenities but anti-monarchist sentiments at passers-by, so they moved him to Vincennes, and otherwise he would have been released. It was rather like the Tower of London. Even at the Tower of London's height, it was quite a civilised place to be a prisoner. I mean, you got wine and food, and you got an allowance, you got tobacco, you could move around as much as you like.
So this was like the Groucho of the prison world.
Yeah! The English equivalent, as I've mentioned, is the Tower of London. So tell me why the Cray twins were imprisoned in the Tower of London.
Were they ravens? Who were
No,
named
that's
after
a
them?
cunning answer. The ravens do have weird names, and they're literally prisoners because they're kept in cages at the moment because of the worries of bird flu. They're called Gwillem, Thor, Eugene, Munin, Branwyn, Bran, Gandalf and Baldric.
And Dave. So they did actually have the Cray...
They had Ronnie and Reggie of the 3 Cray
Was there a
brothers.
prison officers' strike or something? There's nowhere else to put them?
No, they were a bit younger than that.
Did they go on a school trip?
No.
National service.
Very good, absolutely
Because
right.
there was a barracks there, wasn't there?
There was a barracks there, and that was their one. It was the City of London Regiment of the 1st Battalion of the Royal Fusiliers, which is where people like Michael Caine had gone when they'd done their national service. People in the East End, that was their local barracks. But they were actually imprisoned there because when they did their national service, they don't like it. Ron and Reggie didn't like it. And they beat up their training sergeant and went home to have tea with their mum. The weird thing about Ronnie is he was pretty psychopathic, and as most people know, he was gay. But he had this weird thing that everyone had to admire his boyfriend. So they'd have a meeting of the firm, and there'd be the heads of Plaistow and Hackney and Dalston and all the local branches of the firm. And there'd be Ronnie, the colonel, and there'd be a 17-year-old youth called Cyprian or something. And Ronnie would go, hello, everybody, this is Cyprian. And hello, Cyprian. And Ronnie would go, isn't he gorgeous? And they'd all have to go, oh, he's lovely, Ronnie. Oh, you pick him. Oh, you lucky dog. David Putnam, of all people, used to manage them for a very short period of time. I know, it's weird. Yeah, he did. They wanted to go legitimate. And he tells the story of how they were with David Bailey, who took those famous photographs of the 2 of them in suits, you know, standing one behind the other. And they were all in this pub. It wasn't the Blind Beggar, but it was a Cray pub. Ronnie had gone off. He was the insane one. So they're left with Reggie, who's supposedly the normal one. And these couple of drunks come in, and they suddenly spot David Bailey, and they go, oh, you're David Bailey, aren't you? Go on, take me photograph. And David Bailey goes, no. He said, no, don't be a f***ing arsehole, take me photograph. He said, no, I've run out of film. Give me that, take my photograph. Reggie gets up, looks at himself in the mirror across the bar like that, and suddenly goes, baff, like that, and knocks him right across the room, and he bangs his head against a piano, and blood starts to trickle down. And his mate goes to him, and they just flee. And David Bailey, to his credit, is very angry. He says, Reggie, you are a tosser. For God's sake, I get this every day. I'm a photographer, people know what I look like. I can handle it. You don't have to do that. You could have killed him. There was this terrible silence that Reggie had been shouted at like this. And he gave a little shy smile. He said, well, to tell you the truth, Mr. Bailey, I'd had my eye on that all afternoon. He'd been eating my sandwiches. Very extraordinary. Anyway.
Hoover the talking seal. An audacious, loquacious seal called Hoover, after each meal, having vacuumed the fish right out of the dish, would jabber and babble, blabber and gabble, chatter and prattle and spiel.
Hey, very good. Thank you. Oh. Our resident poet, Mr. Roger McGoss, thank you very much indeed, the Hoover poem. All this talk of crime brings us to the short, sharp shock that we call general ignorance. So fingers on your hand-cranking buzzers and bells, please. And what are the four main religions of... What are the four main religions of India? Yes, Alan.
Sikhs,
Yep.
Buddhism,
Oh, no, it's not one.
Hinduism,
Hinduism, yes.
Christianity,
Yes, and one more. You've only said...
Islam.
Muslim,
Islam, yes. In correct order, they are Hindu, Islam, Christian and Sikh.
No Buddhists
There are
in
Buddhists.
India?
It was invented in India, of course. The Buddha was an Indian. But it's not one of the four main religions. There are 805 million Hindus. There are 134 million Muslims. There are 23 million Christians. Just 23... There's 22.5 million more than there are in Britain. And there are 19 million Sikhs. Buddhists, there are 7 million of them. 0.7% of the population. Although Buddhism was founded in India, its spiritual home today is, of course, Tibet. And the taking of life is forbidden in Buddhism. Tibetan butchers, therefore, are ranked amongst the lowest of the low, along with undertakers and blacksmiths, oddly enough. But whose job is it in Tibet to milk the yaks?
I know who cleans the hooves.
Who's that?
Yaksmiths.
Yaksmiths. Yaksmiths.
The milkman. Is there a milkman has to milk?
Oh, no, there is no milkman.
Do they have milk? Is it nice?
Tibet smells of butter, they say. There's butter everywhere. The trick part of it is the yak is the male of the species. So nobody milks a yak.
What's a female called?
The knack, oddly enough.
The knack.
A knack or a drig.
One of the things I really remember Tibet, and about yaks too, they make sculptures, apparently.
They do.
Every year there's a
Religious-
festival
yep.
of these sculptures made out of buttermilk. And there's apparently a guy in the 20s, who's a famous surrealist Buddhist sculptor, actually made a yak out of buttermilk,
Wow.
which he was able to milk, and made another, even larger.
How tall is a wild yak?
I think enormous.
Yeah, I'm going 6 feet.
Yeah.
6'5", my height, in fact.
I'm going to say 4 foot.
Well, that would be a domesticated yak.
I'm going to say 9, maybe 10 foot.
I've already told you that it's 6'5".
I think it's about 15 foot.
I'm so glad I was never your teacher. I really am. But yeah, you're right.
20 foot, sir.
Aside from their meat and all their milk products, particularly the yoghurt and the butter and the cheese, they have the longest hair of any animal, the yak. It's sort of 2 foot long. And it was used for
Wigs.
the 17th century wigs, your periwig, your Charles II style wig. And in fact, the BBC wig store, we checked, still has quite a large number of yak wigs. And if you're going to play Santa at Christmas, then the chances are your beard will be yak.
Couldn't we introduce the yak to Britain?
I don't see why not. I mean, they are rather specialised for the altitudes in Tibet.
If you introduce them to Britain, they'd blow up. It's a huge, incredible sight. Why not? Or we could have yaks dangling from balloons. The altitude would be right.
Fantastic. You could. I love the idea.
Have a hot air balloon. Come up to see the yak fields. 5,000 feet up. And they still graze. On what? Air.
They'd have to be out there because their blood cells are half the size, but they have twice as many.
So actually, when they came down to sea level, they'd be immensely powerful.
Like Terence Stamp in Superman 2.
Very much like that.
Yeah. Kneel before Zod. There we are. Let's move from yaks now to crabs. How many legs do crabs have?
I know.
Yes, he's
8.
8. We've got 8 there, and I'm afraid that's a 10.
They've, of course, got 10. And they're snippers.
Well, the answer is 10. You're right. The front ones are tucked in, as you can see, but they do count as legs.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
What animal has legs that don't reach the floor?
They do walk with
Sort
them.
of legs are they?
They are functioning legs. They do walk with them, sideways, backwards, forwards.
I do have a children's poem, if I remember it.
Oh, go on, yeah.
A crab, I'm told, will not bite or poison you just for spite. Won't lie in wait beneath a stone until one morning, out alone, you poke a finger like a fool into an innocent-looking pool. Won't grab your hand and drag you off across the sand, down into the bottom of the sea to eat you dressed for Sunday tea. The crab, I'm told, is a bundle of fun. With claws like that, pull the other one.
They're not legs. It's arms.
Of course, if you'd said 6, you could have been right, because the crab louse has 6, yeah.
6.
Well done. What are you thinking of?
A crab louse.
Ah, crab louse. And where do crab lice live?
In a crab louse house. Sorry, it's hanging around with Roger for an evening. It makes him rhyme.
Crab louse house. In your pubes, or in one's pubes.
That'd be disgusting.
They do. That's where you get crabs. Go into Boots and say one's pubes are infested with crab lice. A bottle of Quelada lotion, if you please.
Is said crab louse related to that crab?
No. They're called it because they latch on to the follicles of the pubes or the eyebrow or the eyelashes, even, and beards.
Why are you looking at me? I have had crabs, and I got them from a dodgy sofa. That's what she told me. I went to the doctor's, and it was one of those traditional British doctors with a big bow tie. And he took his bifocals off and said, He strapped on some binoculars and then looked at my pubis very closely and went, And I just crazed up laughing. He said, I'm afraid, Mr. Moore, you're going to have to stop laughing. You're jiggling about and I can't focus on the crab.
Now, what did George Washington have to say about cherry trees?
No one wants to say the obvious.
What's the obvious?
In his garden was a tree, which he didn't chop down.
Yes, you're avoiding our trap. There's a famous story every American knows about Washington saying, Papa, I cannot tell a lie. I cut down the cherry tree with my axe. It's a completely made-up story written for children by someone called Parson Weems, who tells this story to show what an honest fellow he was, that even as a 6-year-old child, he said, I cannot tell a lie.
His father said something like, my son, that you have told the truth means more to me than 1,000 trees bathed in gold or silver or
This
something.
is brilliant. You must get points here.
But I remember this just when I was young, because I really wanted someone to say that to me. You know, your dad, he broke his favourite cup, you know. Who broke my cup? I did, Dad. You bloody, you know.
He never said, run to my arms, you dearest boy, run to my arms. Glad am I, George, that you killed my tree, for you have paid me for 1,000-fold. Such an act of heroism in my son is worth more than 1,000 trees, though blossomed with silver and their fruits of purest gold.
As if.
Yeah. And then he said, brilliant, can I watch CBeebies now?
Next, what would you call these people? Yes.
Beef eaters.
Oh!
Yes, they are.
No.
Yeoman.
Yeoman of the Guard.
Well, I know that.
No.
That's what people call them, beef
No,
eaters.
no, these are Yeomen of the Guard, and those are beef eaters. Different uniform.
Oh, yeah, isn't it?
Well, to me, Aston Villa and West Ham have the same uniform.
The Yeoman of the Guard away kit.
Just so you get it clear, the ones with the straps are the Yeomen of the Guard, the ones without the straps are the beef eaters. They are the Yeoman Wardens, the ones who would have looked after Ronnie and Reggie, no doubt. And if we can go back to look at the Yeomen of the Guard, they have the arquebus strapped to their guns, the actual Yeomen
Are they
of the
allowed
Guard.
to go to Specsavers, or should they all be...
So, yes, the Yeoman Warders, who never carried guns, have a slightly different strapping arrangement in their uniforms, and they're the jailers of the Tower of London. Speaking of which, brings us to our final challenge for you. You should have your 4 props, and I want to see if you've worked out how you could use them for escaping from jail. That's a green felt tip pen. It was used for an escape by someone called Stephen Russell from the Estelle unit in Houston, Texas.
Did he colour himself green?
Yes.
Pose as a leaf.
You were nearly there. He wore a white jumpsuit.
Only painted it green so he looked like one of the prison guards.
One of the doctors. And he escaped as a doctor. He just walked out the door. What have you got there, Roger? What's that?
Dental floss.
Dental floss. This was Vincenzo Curcio, a mafioso. And this was only in the year 2000, quite recently, in Turin. He was guilty of murder and arranging 7 other murders, so he was a serious criminal. How did he escape using only dental floss?
You get your dental floss, hang it round the bars and leave it dangling. Then you get your potato and you break it up and you stick it on the floor in front of the door.
Yes.
And then you put spots all over yourself at the green.
Yeah.
You know, make plague noises. And when the warder runs in, opens the door, because he slips, careers across the cell door, get your chilli powder, throw it in his eyes, and then in the confusion, get the end of the dental floss and tie it to the inside of the door.
Right.
So when he gets up, screaming, say, "You bastard, all of you," runs out, slams the door behind him, the bars come on. Away.
Fantastic. Brilliant. You've used all 4 props for one escape, but let's just keep with the floss. This man, Vincenzo Curcio, this mafioso, he flossed the bars and it sawed through them. That's how strong the floss was. And these particular iron bars were very good at withstanding explosions, but not good at withstanding dental floss. What about the chili powder?
Well, I think throwing it in someone's eyes
Is exactly right. It happened in Pakistan in 1997. 5 prisoners escaped by throwing chili powder in the eyes of a prison officer.
That would hurt.
So that leaves us the potato.
Is it like in Escape from Alcatraz, where you just draw a picture on it and it looks like your head and you leave it in the bed?
Well, not far off. Have you ever seen a film called Take the Money and Run? The wonderful Woody Allen film. And he does something with soap. Do you remember?
You to make a gun, shape of a gun.
What Woody Allen does is he carves a gun out of soap and then blacks it with boot black, so it looks just like a pistol. And then he holds up the prison officer, and they go out across the courtyard, and it's raining, and when you cut to the wide shot, it's this great ball of lava that he's led back into the prison. But he was basing it on the true story of one of the most famous criminals in the 20th century in America.
Dillinger.
Dillinger. John
Dillinger.
Dillinger carved his potato into the shape of a gun and got away with it.
But a very small gun. If you had
Yes.
to carve one out of that,
It may have been a bigger potato.
it'd be pathetic.
Which brings us to the small matter of the scores, ladies and gentlemen. In equal first place, with time off for good behaviour, remission and patrol, Vic and Roger were on 1 point.
1.
In third place, just over the wall, Mark Steele on -6. But banged up in solitary tonight. It's Alan on -39. And my thanks go to Roger, Vic, Mark and Alan. I leave you with a famous denial. When the American president, Thomas Jefferson, was asked if he was having an affair with one of his slaves, Sally Hemings, he replied, "The man who fears no truth has nothing to fear from lies." DNA recently on Sally's descendants has shown that this meant yes. Good night.
Well, the last QI in the series is starting right now over on BBC4, or see it here on BBC2, same time next week. Later tonight, the only show in town that dares to put the Scissor Sisters, The Good, The Bad and The Queen, and Tony Bennett on the same set. A final brilliant session with Jules Holland at 11:35.